All right, Dennis, let's talk about that sinking filling. You've just spent 20 minutes creating the most beautiful, lifelike anatomy on a Class 2 composite. The grooves are perfect, the cusps are magnificent, you're feeling like a true artist. Then you take off the rubber dam, you check the bite, and it's high. And you proceed to spend the next 10 minutes grinding away all of your beautiful work, turning your masterpiece into a flat, ugly, unprofitable mess. If that sounds familiar, then this video is for you. Dentists waste a huge amount of valuable chair time chasing the bite, which destroys their anatomy, kills their profitability per hour, and creates incredible frustration. We often blame picky, parafunctional patients, but the real issue is a lack of systematic, predictable protocol for managing occlusion from start to finish. Most dentists just wing it and hope for the best. My approach is a little bit different. Today I'm going to give you my 3-phase protocol for perfect occlusion. This is a system that moves the bite check from an afterthought at the end to an integral part of the entire restorative process. So if you're ready to stop grinding away your profit and start creating restorations that look great and feel perfect the first time, then stick with me. Now, this entire protocol is built on 3 essential phases. The first and most critical is the work you do before you ever touch the tooth. Then I'll show you how to use the adjacent teeth as a blueprint while you're actually placing the restoration. And finally, this is where most dentists fall short, I'll give you a multi-sensory approach to verifying the work that goes way beyond just looking at blue marks. But we have to start at the beginning with the foundational step. The biggest mistake dentists make is treating every prepared tooth the same, like a blank canvas. The truth is, most of our daily dentistry should be conformative, meaning that it must fit perfectly and seamlessly into the patient's existing occlusal scheme without changing anything. The solution is to gather all your occlusal information before you even think about administering the anesthetic. You must have a clear picture of the destination before you ever start the journey. This means getting out your articulating paper, having the patient tap and grind, and maybe even take an intraoral photograph of the existing contacts. This step is especially critical for those parafunctional patients, the grinders and the clenchers. They aren't picky for no reason. They have a highly refined, grooved bite that their system has perfected over the years. Their proprioception is very fine-tuned. When you're off by even just a few microns, that can feel like a mountain to them. Your job is not to fight their occlusion, it's just to replicate it. So before you numb them up, analyze their pre-existing wear facets and all the different shapes and morphology. Understand the landscape that you need to rebuild. And now that your roadmap, or you have that roadmap, the next step is to use what I call anatomic referencing during the restoration itself. Stop guessing where the anatomy should go. Your guide is sitting right next door. The height of the adjacent marginal ridge is your absolute ceiling. You can never ever violate that. A high marginal ridge is a guaranteed food trap and a guaranteed source of patient complaints. So use your Explorer to fill that height and make sure it's perfectly flush. And more importantly, use your Explorer as a slope copying tool. Visually and physically trace the angles of the wear facets and the cusp inclines and the neighboring teeth. Pay attention to how steep or shallow they are. Then transfer those exact same slopes and angles to your composite as you sculpt it. You are not creating random pretty anatomy that you saw in a magazine. You're just reverse engineering the patient's functional pathway. When you do this, you're building a restoration that is already 90% of the way to being in perfect occlusion before you ever even check it. When you get good at this, you can actually do it pretty fast. This whole approach really came from a time a couple years out of school when I started getting really bored with fillings. To make things more interesting, I would challenge myself to get faster and then try to be more efficient. One of the things I started doing was I would try to practice memorizing the exact anatomy and shape of the tooth right before I prepped it. I'd really try and burn that picture into my mind so that when I went to fill the tooth, I could replicate it as close to the original as possible. I kind of made it into a little game to see if I could do the whole procedure and have literally 0 adjustments at the end. And over time, I actually got pretty decent at it. I found that this proactive approach was 10 times better than the original old way of just drilling, overfilling everything, then spending forever grinding it back down. It was also a really fun way to keep an everyday procedure interesting and engaging. So you've done your prep work, you maybe used your anatomic referencing to build the restoration, and now it's time for the final check. Now this is where you should use multiple senses to audit, because relying on just one sense is definitely a recipe for failure. The biggest amateur mistake is to put some blue paper in, see a mark, immediately ask the numb patient, how does that feel? Well, their feeling is gone. They have no idea how it feels. Their answer is completely unreliable. Instead, you must use 3 of your own senses. First, obviously, sight. You need to analyze the articulating paper marks. So just use thin paper. Understand the difference between a true pinpoint centric stop and a false wide smear mark that just comes when the paper drags across a wet surface. Know your occlusal anatomy. If you see a big blue mark on the incline of a non-functional cusp, you know that's a false contact and you should ignore it. Focus only on marks that correspond to a true functional contact point. Second is to use some sound. This is a powerful and definitely underutilized tool. If you've done your initial visual check, take the paper out and just have the patient tap together firmly. And listen, you need to train your ear a little bit, but our harmonious bite, where all the teeth are hitting at the same time, makes a solid, crisp thud. Definitely different. If it's a single high spot, it creates different sound. It's like a duller, single point sound that it just sounds wrong. Once you learn to hear the difference, you can often diagnose a high spot with your eyes closed. And the third and final sense is touch. This kind of has 2 parts. First, you use a piece of articulating paper. Check the drag or the hold on the adjacent untouched teeth. Then check the drag on your new restoration. The hold should feel equal. If the paper pulls through the adjacent contacts but holds tight on your new filling, you're obviously still high, even if the paper mark looks okay. Then second, you can also place your fingers on the buccal surfaces of the teeth in that quadrant and have the patient tap. Then you can feel for fremitus or vibrations. You should feel a light, evenly distributed vibration across the teeth. If you feel a disproportionate jolt on the tooth you just worked on, the load is obviously not being shared equally and you need to adjust a little bit more. So by implementing this 3-phase protocol, doing your diagnostic work up front, using anatomic referencing during the procedure, then verifying with multiple senses at the end, you transform your restorative procedure into something that is way more successful than you ever could be. You go from a frustrating, unpredictable grind fest to just a smooth, efficient, and predictable process that delivers a much better result for the patient. And it also saves you a ton of time and stress. Now, of course, this may be a little overkill for one simple filling, but practice these things and find what works well for you. It will help you pay a little more attention to the occlusion and will make a big difference in your clinical results. Now, if you found any of this helpful, please subscribe and you can get some more content like this in the future. So let's keep working together to help make dentistry a little more fun, fulfilling, and rewarding.